Hi everyone and welcome to CrickStacks. Today I am going to show you how to deploy a Nuxt application to AWS Elastic Container Service using GitHub Actions. On my blog I have a instruction document on how to do this, so I'll post a link so you can follow along if you want. So I have this introduction that specifies why this is a good approach. So you can go and read it yourself, and let's just get into it, the instructions. So first we have to create the Nuxt application and host it in the GitHub repository. The prerequisites are you need to have Node installed in your computer. You can go download it at node.js.com and it'll come with a Node package manager, and then you also need to have Git installed, which you can install from git-sem.com. Once you have all that installed, now we can go and create our Nuxt application. And we do it by using this npx create Nuxt app with the name of your application. So I'm already here on my folder, CrickStacks. You can put it wherever you want on your computer. And I am going to name this CrickStacks for this video. So once you start downloading, you just follow the prompts. Choose whatever you want. I'm not gonna go fancy and install any temp modules, linting tools, testing frameworks. I'm gonna do single page app, and this is gonna be a Node.js server hosting. Deployment tools, none. And then when you download Git and you connect it to your GitHub repository, this is where you would put your GitHub information so you can deploy it directly to GitHub. So now that it's installing, I'm gonna go check over here. You're gonna have the directory structure. Now there's a certain way that I would structure it, but this is beyond this video, so this gives you some information on it that you can read on. First things, I'm going to change the index page just to say hello world. So let's see, it's still installing. Okay, it's done. I'm going to go into that directory that I just created, CrickStacks. I'm gonna ls, and you can see all the directory structure for that Nuxt application. Now I use Visual Studio Code, so I'm gonna open this in Visual Studio Code. You can download whatever IDE you want. Code dot, it'll open it. And then I'm going to open a terminal here, and I'm gonna work from in here. So let me make this bigger so you can actually see it. Let me make this smaller. There we go. So I'm going to close this terminal so I don't get confused, because I get confused a lot when I have multiple terminals open and start doing things in different ones. So first thing, let's say if this is running, npm run dev, so it'll open it, and this is running on localhost 3000. Let's go check it out. So this is the boilerplate welcome tutorial for Nuxt. Now I copied this code, the hello world code. I'm gonna put it on the index page. Just remove all that, save. And then when I save, I can go back to here, and now you see this. I am gonna go and say hello world from CrickStacks. Save it again, and it updates. So we know it's running. Now I'm going to stop this and we'll see what the next step is. We ran it, it's working. So now we create our GitHub repository. So let's go to GitHub. I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to call it CrickStacks demo deployment app. I'll make it private. I'm just going to delete this when I'm done. I'm not going to add any README file or anything because Nuxt creates that for you. So I'm creating the repository, so it's in there now. Now we need to go back to our application and initialize the Git repo. So Git, when you initialize it, it initializes it to a master branch. You can do git init dash dash initial dash branch equals main to initialize it to the main, or you can do a global configuration so all of your git inits are into the main branch. And if you're going to be using GitHub, I would recommend this. So I'll go back here, git init global. So now it'll initialize it to the main branch. So now I'm going to add all these files that we just created. So git status. These are all the untracked files. It already initialized it with all of that in there. So this is git add. So we'll do git status, and now it's green. It's in there. And now I'm going to do commit the changes. So I'm just going to copy this, git commit -m, and then the message. And now we have to add our repository. So I'll do up to origin, git remote add origin, and I'm going to use this link for our repository. There we go. So git branch, still on the master. It did not change it to main. Okay, so the global configuration did not work. I think you need to restart the terminal for it to take effect. So I'm just going to do a git checkout branch main. So now we're in the main branch, and I'm going to do all the additions again. Let's do a git add, git commit. Okay, git status, git remote version. Okay, so I already have all that installed, but we're in the main branch. So now we get to push the code to the main branch. Git push -u origin main. So here we go. It pushed everything. So now we can go to our GitHub, refresh this, and now we see all our code in there. So that's good. Okay. Now we are going to, we don't need to do all this. We already did the installing the dependencies when we created the application. So part 2. First thing is, wait a second, step 5, part 1, 2, summary of part 1. Oh man, that messed me up. Okay, here's a summary of everything we did. So part 2. Now we're going to deploy the Nuxt application using GitHub Actions, and we're gonna create the AWS services, the EC2, the load balancer, the Route 53 domain name, so it connects to the load balancer. So first things first, we're going to go to you're gonna go to your AWS account, and we're gonna create security groups. We're gonna need 2 security groups, one for the load balancer to allow it to take in traffic from the internet, from Route 80 and Route 443 for HTTP and HTTPS. And then also we're gonna need a second security group for the Elastic Container Service, so it can talk to the load balancer and vice versa. So let's go to AWS and log me out. Let's log in. Okay, so we're gonna go to security groups. All right. So here, I've already created the 2 security groups. Basically, I'm just gonna show you how to do it. Let me close these 2. Delete them. Delete. Okay. If I refresh, one's gone. Oh, guess I only did one. Oh, I couldn't delete the second one because it's being used reference on the other one. Okay, so create security group. This is going to be for the load balancer. Load balancer security group dash crick stacks. Description, load balancer security group. So your VPC, I have just the default, but make sure you choose the one you want to use. And when you choose that one, you'll use that one for everything you create. And they have to be in the same region. Okay, so we'll add inbound rules. So for the load balancer, it's going to be HTTP port 80, and we're going to allow it from the IPv4. I'm going to do another one to also allow from IPv6. You don't need to do that, but, and I'm going to do HTTPS, same thing for both of them. Okay, and outbound rules, all traffic. Create security group, so that is created. So now we're going to create one for the ECS service. So ECS service security group dash crick stacks and then ECS security group. And I don't know how to spell this morning. Guess I don't know how to spell anytime. Same VPC. So the rule here, we're gonna use a custom TCP, and we need to allow port 3000 because that's where our container, our application is running from, port 3000. And then here we're going to allow traffic to this from the load balancer we just created, the load balancer security group that we created, and then outbound traffic, all traffic. So now the load balancer and the ECS security groups are connected, and we're going to add these security groups to each one as we create them. Okay, so that's done. Both security groups. So now we want to set up our Elastic Container Repository where we're going to be hosting our container. So let's go here, Elastic Container Registry, and let's create a new repository. So we'll call it repository-crickstacks, mutable. Okay, so that's created for the ECR. So now we're going to need the Docker file in our application, in our project. So here I wrote the instructions. So we'll copy this. We go to our application and we create a Docker file on the root, Docker file. And we paste this. Now here you have to change it, the working directory, to your application name, whatever you want. We are going to be using Node 16 Alpine. Here it's going to install dependencies, run it, expose port 3000, and if you just get the boilerplate Docker, it's not going to include this host. We need this for the Nuxt application for it to listen to all the IPs on AWS, and then the watcher to avoid reaching the limit. So those are the two things, and actually there's more that I need to update the file with. So let me get that information. Actually, delete. Oh. Okay, so this is the other dependencies that you need right here. So you'll add this host, and this limiting file watcher. So we'll save that in there. So here, what's next? We created that. Created the cluster, the ECR. We created the cluster. Next thing, we need to create a task definition that will be used by the service. the Elastic Container Service. So let's go to here, or yeah, the repository, ECR repository. So we're gonna go to Elastic Container Service, and then we need to create a cluster first. So cluster, CRICstacks. We're gonna do AWS Fargate, and monitoring we'll leave it, encryption we'll leave it, tags we'll leave it as is. So we're just creating the cluster, serverless. You can also create a EC2 instance, but we're not gonna do that. So create. So it's creating. Once it's finished, the next thing we'll do is create a task definition. So we'll create the task definition. Task definition dash CRICstacks for the name. Again, we're going to use AWS Fargate. I'm just gonna keep the default here. Just do 2 and 4. You can do whatever you want, depending how much resources you want. The task role, I'm just gonna leave it as is, and then the task execution role is giving authorization to be able to execute those roles. So leave it as ECS. You can create one as well. I'm gonna name the container-CRICstacks, and then the image URI is what you will get from the Elastic Container Registry, the repository that you created, which is this one right here. So here you'll copy this, put it on your image URI, and this is telling it that when the service creates this container, go and look at here for the container that you want to build. But make sure you add :latest. So it'll take the latest code. And man, there we go. I wish I made this bigger sooner. Sorry about that. So latest. And then the container port is port 3000. That's where your application is going to be running. So make sure you put 3000 here, and then name it container-CRICstacks-3000, whatever you want. And then we'll go down here, keep everything else as is. So let's see, health check, we'll leave that. Container timeouts, we'll just leave all this as is. Monitoring, nope. Tags, nope. So we'll create this task definition. So now this is created. So now we'll go back here to the document. So we got the task definition. Now we need to create the load balancer and the target group. So we'll go to the EC2 instance, EC2, go down here to target groups. Now the target group is what the load balancer is going to use to send traffic to your container, to your service. So we'll create a new target group. If you're using an EC2 instance, you'll do instances. If you're using Fargate, do IP addresses. And then target group name, again, target group dash CRICstacks. Protocol, the target group again, it's port 3000. That's where we want to send the request to. VPC, make sure you keep the same VPC for all of them. Health checks, okay. This is what when the service is running, it's gonna try and check to make sure your application is up and running. So we're gonna create a health route in our application. Advanced health settings. We're gonna override the traffic port to make sure it's pointing to port 3000. And here is where you'll set your thresholds for how many times you want to check something to make sure something is healthy or unhealthy. So here, I just want to check 2 times to make sure it's healthy. I'll do 3 times unhealthy. You can put whatever you want. The timeout, how long does it take to check it? I'm gonna do 120 for that, and the interval has to be higher, so 121 seconds. If you do, whatever, 5 seconds, if your app is not up, if your application is not up and running by then, it's gonna time out. It's gonna say it's unhealthy, even though it just needs a little bit more time for it to run. So we'll do that. Okay, so here, the health, before we create this, we can go back to our application, and then we're going to go to our Nuxt config file, and here we're gonna set up a middleware route for it to check to make sure it's healthy. So here we'll go to the top, and then we'll create a server middleware with the path health, which is what we put here, health. And then we're gonna send a request back saying like, hey, we're here, we're running, it's okay. So I'll save this, and I'm not sure if I put that anywhere in here. I did not, but make sure you create that health. I'll add it to the instructions when I'm done. All right, so that's there, created. So when I push it, it will be there. So let's go back to where we are creating the target group. So we're done. Next, here we're gonna remove this IP because once we start the service, it's gonna automatically send the IP addresses to this target group for it to check. Make sure this is 3000, same VPC, and that's it. Create target group. Okay, that's successfully created. So now that the target group is created, we're gonna create the load balancer. So let's go to load balancer, and this is going to be an application load balancer. Create. So let's name it load balancer dash CRICStacks. It is internet facing, IPv4, same VPC, and here you're gonna choose the availability zones that you want to use. So you need a minimum of 2, and here you have to make sure, so whatever you create here, when you go and create your service, I will show you that in a little bit, make sure you choose the same ones and delete the ones that you're not using in your load balancer, or else your container is not going to run because it's going to try and look for them in these availability zones and you did not choose them. So we'll choose those first 2. Now here for the load balancer security group, we remove the default and add the one that you created, the load balancer security group, to allow it to get traffic from port 80 from the internet. And now here is, you're gonna tell it to send it to this target group that we just created. So basically you're gonna allow it, in the security group, to take traffic from the internet on port 80 and forward the traffic to target group CRICStacks, which is the one that's pointing to your ECS service container. Okay, so let's go back here, load balancer tags, no. And that's all you have to set up here. Create load balancer. Okay, so it's provisioning it. If I go back, it's provisioning the load balancer right here. Now, let's see if we can go, yeah, so here, now we want to set up our listener. So basically we have our domain, which will be in Route 53. We'll go to Route 53. And here I'm in Route 53 in my hosted zones for my domain, Dave Crick, and I'm going to create a new record telling it, so CRICStacks.davecrick.com, a record type with an alias. I'm going to tell it when somebody comes to CRICStacks.davecrick.com, send them to my load balancer. So load balancer. So it's not a network. We created an application load balancer, and then we created it on the East region, which was, here, let's do US-East. East Virginia. This is the region we created in. And now we can see our load balancer here. So when somebody goes to this domain, we'll send them to the load balancer. It'll be simple routing. And then, oops, I don't want to add another record. I want to create the record. All right, so it's creating the record here, Crick stacks. You can view the status. When it's finished, it'll say active, I believe. So we created that record. So now we can go to the load balancer and we'll add another rule. On this rule, we're gonna add a condition for a path that crick stacks.dave.crick.com. Whenever it's listening to this, it'll allow traffic from there. And then we will allow the crick stacks.dave.com, davecrick.com, to forward to the target groups, which will be the target group we created. Okay, wait one, next. Priority, we'll just choose one. And next, and create. Okay, so now we have another listener on there allowing traffic from crickstacks.dave.com and to forward it to the target groups. So let's see the load balancer. It's still provisioning. So let's look at the instructions. We created the target group. I skipped the order in which I was doing it. I went over to create the Route 53, the domain, since I was already right there on the balancer, but load balancer. So we create the load balancer. So now we need to create the GitHub Actions deploy YAML file that will allow our application, when we push it to the repository, to the main repository branch, to deploy directly to AWS. So I have this right here. Make sure you update this with your information. So now we're going to create our deploy YAML to allow our application to automatically deploy from GitHub to AWS using GitHub Actions. So we're going to copy this code right here. Let's see, let's copy this, oops, too much. Copy, and I'm going to go to our project, and we're going to create a new folder called .github /workflows, and then in there I'm going to create a deploy.yaml file, and in that YAML file I'm going to paste the code. So let's go to the beginning. Here you're telling it that anytime there's a push to the main branch in your repository, create a deploy. So run this. It'll configure, here's where you configure your AWS credentials. You have to find your access key and your access ID and your access key. And then right here, put the region that you're deploying, like your load balancer, your ECS service, everything. Make sure you have the same region. So here you're telling it it'll log into your Elastic Container registry and deploy the Docker container there. And then it'll start the service looking for that. So, and it'll force a new deployment. Every time you deploy your code to the main and it deploys it to AWS, it'll force a new deployment with the latest container. So here, I'm going to pause this real quick. I'm going to put my keys in here, and then I'll come back and then we'll deploy it in a little bit. Let me pause it. Okay, I added my keys, my ID specifically. And then here's the Nuxt config file that we added earlier, the server middleware to check the health. I went out of order, but here it is. Here's the information on how to do that. So now that that is configured, we need to create the Elastic Container Service for it to start pushing that code. But since we just made changes to our code here, let's deploy this first and see it deploy the container to the ECR. So git status, we made changes to the Nuxt config to check the health of the app to make sure it's running. We added the GitHub deploy YAML, and then we added the Docker file. So we'll do git add, git commit, adding Docker file and deploy YAML, file, and updating health check. Okay, git push origin main. All right, so it pushed it to our GitHub. And now here's the GitHub workflow. So now that that's there, GitHub Actions will automatically pick that file up and start deploying to AWS. And you can go here and check the deployment status. So if we go to our repository, there's nothing there right now. But if we refresh, once this is done, that container will be up there. So this won't take that long. It's pretty quick when it's just a simple application. But as your application grows, this is going to take a little bit longer to deploy. So we'll just wait a little bit. Okay, let's see. Nothing yet, still deploying. All right, so it pushed it. Now the ECS failed because we haven't created the service yet. That's okay, because I wanted to have the image there first, because if we create the service, it's gonna start looking here for the image. And if the image is not there, it's just gonna create a container, destroy a container, it's just gonna loop back and forth. So I wanna create this here first. So now we have the image here. So now I can go back to the ECS, Elastic Container Service, go to clusters, and now down here we can create our service that will take that container and make it available, make your application available. So we'll click create. We're going to do a launch type for a Fargate. Latest, it's a service application type. We're gonna just have it running. It's not a task where we'll run it and destroy it. So the family is the task definition that we created. So you'll choose that, and it's always gonna take the latest. Now service name, again, service dash CrickStacks. Replicas, I'm just gonna have one replica running. You can choose as many as you want, but for me, I'm gonna delete all of this when I'm done, because there is a cost to it, and I've ran it before, and while it's not as expensive when you're not actually providing a service and making income from it, it's just wasted money that you're throwing out there. So it's gonna be a rolling update. I'm not gonna have failure detection. I'm just gonna leave it off. Service connect, leave it as is. So your networking, this is what I was talking about earlier when we created the load balancer on those two regions, the East 1A and 1B. So here, you need to unselect the ones that you did not choose on your load balancer. So just choose the two or whatever, whichever ones you chose. Just make sure those are the same. And then for the security group, we're going to use an existing security group. If you remember in the beginning, we created the ECS security group. So undo the default, we'll do the ECS security group. This is the one that allows the security group to talk to the load balancer. Okay, and then down here on the load balancing, we're gonna create or choose the load balancer we created. So it's an application load balancer. It's gonna use this container that we created on port 3000. And then we're gonna use an existing load balancer, which is a load balancer dash CRICStacks. We're gonna use the existing listener that we created on port 80, which is looking for CRICStacks and sending it to this target group. And then we're also gonna use the existing target group CRICStacks. Service auto-scaling, just gonna leave it. Volume and tags, leave it. So now we can create our service. All right. So the service is going to take a little bit. You can see it up here. Now you can go to CloudFormation and check the status on here. We created the cluster, it's complete. And now here's the service, it's running. You can check the status of it, everything it's doing. And then if you go to CloudWatch, here you will see on the log groups, the task definition CRICStacks that we created. Here you're gonna see all the logs running. So here, there's nothing running yet. So now that we have the service up and running, we can go back to this deploy. And since this failed, we can just go ahead, go all the way to the top. We can rerun the jobs. We can run all the jobs. It'll create another container on the ECR and run the ECS service, or we can just rerun the failed jobs, which is the ECS. So we'll deploy that. Okay, so it's deploying, and now we'll just wait. Let's see, where was it? So here's the service. It's active, and there's one task running. Okay, one completed. And check this path. So there was no failures because it found it, so it's running. So now we can go to the load balancer, and here on this load balancer there's a DNS name. You can copy this link and you can go to it, and the service is still running, I think. Here, let's check it. Let's go to cluster. Yeah, the service is still deploying as a progress. That's why you're seeing this service is temporarily unavailable. So now if you go to cricstacks.davecrick.com or your application, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so it was just this page and this one. Let's make it bigger so you can see it. So if we go to cricstacks.davecrick.com, it's pointing to the load balancer and the service is unavailable. So now we just have to wait for the service to finish here. And this might take a while. So just keep an eye on it. You can go to CloudFormation and see what's going on. And if you have any errors, you'll see them here as well. So I'm gonna pause this, and when it's done, I'll come back. See, it's 10, all right. Okay, I am back, and from 10 to 1:44, so 10, 11, 12, 1, 44, 3 hours, 44 minutes. It should not take that long. There was an error when I had to update the service and restart the service multiple times. But anyway, just look at the errors on the error log here and just work from there. So it's complete. Here's the service. We have it running, and there is one task running right here, the container CRICStacks import 3000. So if we go to the load balancer that we created, that's the local host. Here it is, the load balancer from CRICStacks. And if we go to cricstacks.davecrick.com and refresh it, it'll point to the load balancer. So another thing we can do right now to see it update is we'll go to index view, hello from Crickstacks, part do. Okay, save it. Let's add the changes, git commit -m being part do. All right. Oh. Interesting. Okay, part do, git push origin main. All right, so I pushed it to GitHub. Let's go look at GitHub. Oops, I don't want that. GitHub. So the changes are there. Go to actions, and here it is, part do. Let's look at the deployment. It's deploying the changes. And we'll see how long it takes to update this on the website. Here we'll go to the Elastic container. We have 2 already up there. So it's this morning when I had to redeploy it the second time. So let's see. That's that. And then here on the clusters, we have this service 1 completed. Still deploying. Okay, so it deployed it and it completed. So let's go to the images. There's a 3rd one, the one that just got deployed. And let's go to services. Let's refresh this. So there's 1 pending that will be deployed shortly. It's in progress. So as soon as that finishes, we should see the changes over here. And this is real time, so we'll see how long it takes. We can go to CloudFormation. The service is running good. There's nothing wrong with that. Logs. 148. It started the container. Here it's running both of them. Well, let's see. So it's still making the changes because both of them are running. That's the load balancer. Still pulling from the old one. No errors. Health and metrics. Just too healthy, which is good. And we just wanted to switch over to the new one. So there we go. It finished desired. So if we go and refresh this, we should see part do. Loading. Let's try the load balancer. There it is, part 2 on the load balancer, and I guess I caught it right in between it as it was switching. So here it is. So that's how quick the deployments are for the service. Okay, so got the Route 53, and now we have the summary of everything we did, and that's the end. If you go here, leave a comment if you see anything that you would like to see fixed on this document, or if you have any questions, just ask them right here. You can share this on any of these platforms if you're a part of them. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful for somebody. And yeah, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment on the video. Let me know what you thought of this. I will talk to you all soon on the next video. Bye.